Well, first of all, we need to understand that Israel launched a surprise attack. That means that Israel gave Iran its Sunday punch. They went for decapitation. They employed innovative tactics. The Mossad had these drone factories that were producing drones inside Iran that gave the Israelis an advantage. They were able to deploy drones close to the targets and inflict significant damage on it. They were able to get the Azerbaijanis to open up their airspace so that their air force could attack Iran from a direction Iran hadn't prepared for, coming out of the Caspian Sea. And despite all of these advantages, they didn't deliver the knockout blow, and Iran was able to recover. I want to remind everybody that it was Israel that begged Donald Trump to bring about a ceasefire because Israel couldn't sustain this fight any longer. They were running out of air defense, and the Iranian missiles were becoming more and more accurate. And the Iran used the 20 to 30-year-old missiles early on. They started to bring in the good stuff, and Israel went, "We can't do this." They begged Donald Trump to bring it into the war. So we had this whole theater of America's bombing targets that we had announced to the Iranians in advance, and Iran's firing missiles at an American base that they announced in advance that we had evacuated. And then we had this ceasefire. Why? Because both Iran and Israel were hurting. There's no doubt about it. I'm not going to pretend that Iran didn't get hurt. They admit they got hurt. But it wasn't a knockout blow. And the problem is that both Israel and the United States have set a standard for conflict resolution that's impossible to achieve without literally eliminating the Iranian regime. And that standard is, of course, that Iran will get rid of the totality of its uranium enrichment program, which is something Iran won't do. Iran today is not cooperating with the International Atomic Energy Agency because the IAEA, from the Iranian perspective, was complicit in assisting Israel with the attack by providing intelligence information about the Iranian capabilities, creating the political cover for this attack by publishing a report that, even the IAEA had to say it doesn't say that Iran has a nuclear weapons program. And they said after the war started, no, we don't think Iran has a nuclear weapons program. But the report allowed people to say, oh, look, Iran is violating their obligations, so they must have a nuclear weapons program. The Iranians understand that they're probably going to be attacked by Israel again. And so Iran is positioning itself to be able to deliver a decisive blow early on to Israel. Iran's ballistic missile capabilities have improved since the conflict ended. They are launching new missiles. They're producing these missiles. Their ability to produce missiles weren't retarded. They have significant stockpiles of missiles available to them. Israel's ballistic missile defense systems haven't improved. They're the same. They still have a problem with the depletion of munitions. Iran will blanket them, destroy them, and that's what Iran's trying to establish. It's deterrence through intimidation. I don't know whether or not it'll work, but I think right now, look at the United States evacuating bases in the region because they understand that the next time around, it isn't going to be a gentleman's game of advance notification, that if the United States facilitates an Israeli attack against Iran, American installations will be struck as well.
Matt?
Sure. Scott, just out of curiosity, are you on the side of Iran when it comes to this?
What do you mean on the side of Iran? I just gave a fact.
Do you think that Iran is justified in their actions in attacking Israel and developing nuclear weapons or enriching uranium beyond 60%? I'm just trying to understand where you're coming from.
Could you let me finish? I appreciate it. I think Iran signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and Article 4 of that treaty allows Iran to do everything they're doing right now. So I don't think Iran is violating its obligations. I think Israel has an undeclared nuclear program, isn't a signatory to the NPT. And the last time I checked, it was Israel that attacked Iran, not Iran that attacked Israel. And Iran has a right under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter for self-defense. So, yeah, I'm sort of on Iran's side on this one.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to make that clear. Okay, so, about Iran not attacking Israel, well, I guess maybe we'll start there. You agree on proxy warfare and proxy forces, and that's exactly how Iran has been waging war for quite some time. Thus Hezbollah, thus the Houthis. I mean, we could keep going on, right? Or Ansar Allah, whatever you want to call them. And the IRGC is out there working with them side by side, and guess who else is on the ground that Scott supports? Oh, Russian Spetsnaz over on the ground over inside Syria. And that didn't turn out too good with the Russians when they ended up facing U.S. Special Operations Forces that wiped them off the freaking map. But to go back into it, Iran is developing weapons because they need to, right? They need to continue to advance their weapons because truthfully, their ballistic missile program sucks. When we look at like their targeting rate and things of that nature, even though they might have struck an airfield their first go round, that airfield was back up and running the very next day. You also stated that for some reason Israel wanted it to end. That's factually incorrect to the best of my knowledge, because Donald Trump actually had to call Israel and turn some of their planes around because they wanted to continue to bomb Iran following Fordo being taken out. So there's that. Last, if we're going to look and say that, Russia has got a right to self-defense because Ukraine wants to join NATO, then I think the same rule here would apply when you have the IRGC funding forces such as Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis or Ansarullah, who are constantly attacking Israel. And then you also have Iran that's constantly screaming death to Israel, calls it the little Satan, and wants to wipe it off the map. Now, while they might be a signatory to the NPT, they sure didn't abide by it. Right. The IAEA reports that you're referencing, they actually came out and stated that in two separate locations south of Tehran, they discovered two different sites that, Iran didn't declare where they were developing or enriching uranium. And they found particles upwards of 87.5%. That's in those same IAEA reports that you referenced. So if they're abiding by the NPT and they were taking a look at all of that crap, then why wouldn't they declare those two different sites? And how do you account for that 87+% enriched uranium? And how do you account for the 60+% enriched uranium as well? There's no need for them to do that. There's absolutely no need. And even if you were to quote the very minute medical circumstances where you would need it, you don't need 900+ pounds of the crap. You just don't. So then I would ask, what's the purpose of all of that?
Quick question as well, Matt, before
let me answer it.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I'm not an Iranian spokesperson, so I'll just let Professor Morandi, who you've interviewed, Mario, answer, because I asked him the same question. Matt, I said, why the hell do you have 60% enriched uranium? You don't need it. 20% is the max you need because 20% allows you to create fuel plates for the Tehran research reactor. Why do you need 60%? And he said, because we need to be a threshold nuclear power. And I said, you're basically waving a red flag at the bull at this point. I know Article 4 allows you to do that. But when you enrich uranium to 60%, you raise questions in the mind of people saying, why do you do that? So you and I are actually on the same page here where I said, why the hell would you do that? But then what you're ignoring is Israel's nuclear program. You're ignoring the fact that Israel has nuclear weapons in total violation of the non-proliferation policies of the United States, of the IAEA, of everybody. But everybody seems to gloss over that Israel has nuclear weapons. And, just a little short history lesson. The last time I checked, Hezbollah was created because Israel invaded and occupied southern Lebanon. Hezbollah is a resistance organization resisting against Israeli occupation of Lebanon. The Houthi attacked Israel only after Israel started committing genocide against Hamas, and the Houthi acted in concurrence with Article 2 of the Geneva Convention, where genocide has been found to be taking place. There's a duty to react, to respond. And the Houthi are living up to this duty. Israel, isn't innocent in this. Israel is, guilty of massive war crimes against Hamas. You ignore the Nakba. You talk about, Hamas, but you ignore the point of origin of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
I thought we were talking about Iran right now, and we'd agree.
Well, you brought up
we weren't going to bring up genocide, and then you just throw genocide out there. So
on we'll not go into Gaza yet. If we'll have time, I will do it another day. But just on the last point you said, Scott, Matt, I'm sure you disagree that in terms of Hezbollah not being an Israeli proxy. Just actually, Matt, on your point there, if Hezbollah was not created by Iran, but can't it become an Iranian proxy over time? So if it was created because of the Israeli invasion of Lebanon, but over time it became an Iranian proxy because of all the support, military and financial support that Iran provided Hezbollah. Do you believe that Hezbollah is, I won't use the word proxy, I'll go, Scott and then Matt. I won't use the word proxy, Scott, but would you say it's heavily influenced by Iran? And I always said that the former leader, Hassan Nasrallah, was always in a difficult spot because he had to balance Lebanon's interests and Iran's interests, and Iran was funding him financially and militarily. I want to get your thoughts on this, Scott.
There's no doubt about it. Hezbollah couldn't be the organization it is today without Iranian support, political, economic, and military.
So, would you consider though, as a Hezbollah attack on Israel, an attack by Iran on Israel through Hezbollah, and same as the Houthis?
No, I think Hezbollah has shown throughout its history the ability to operate independent, that Hezbollah has its own vested interests. I believe that Hezbollah was a loaded gun aimed at the Israeli head, so that if Israel ever did attack Iran, Hezbollah would come to the assistance of Iran. But I believe, for instance, we know the 2006 war was started because of independent Hezbollah actions taken without consultation with Iran.
Matt, I'll let you respond to this. And also another question I'll add to it, Matt, is why do you think Hezbollah did not get involved in that 12-day war? And what do you make of Hezbollah today after what happened in Syria with the Assad government, and what happened in Iran.
Well, like I kind of want to counter and go back and forth, but all of these
Please,
different
of
things
course.
that we're going to talk about, they would end up going into like intelligence talking points. And I don't think either of us are going to agree on intelligence talking points. Would you agree with that, Scott? So if I bring up and talk about intel and all of that, you're going to cite this, and we're just going to go back and forth. I agree that what you stated, which was, how they came about could be completely and totally different than where it's at today. And again, that goes back into intelligence talking points, right? With what their motivations and where they're sitting at today. They have kind of came around inside of southern Lebanon, and they have turned over. I think I just checked the stats this morning, about 80% of the territory, and it's like south of Litani, I think over in Tyre, they had like a truckload of weapons and stuff that ended up getting delivered, but they're still not willing to turn over specific amounts of territory. When we look at it, though, and I say, okay, what can I look at it from an unbiased standpoint of it just common sense facts? When I have Ansarullah from Yemen, and I have Hezbollah, and I have Hamas on 3 separate regions who shouldn't have that type of different communication, and I see them launching coordinated attacks against Israel, and the only common denominator really between the 3 of them, other than religious ideology, can connect them all the way back over into Iran with who's funding them, then I have to ask the question, okay, is that actually what's happening? Is Iran the one that's actually orchestrating this entire thing? And I do believe it's so. We have Ansarullah that was actually found, and I believe killed over inside of Iraq. Wasn't prepared to talk on this one. Earlier this year, working alongside like the IRGC, alongside of some IRGC funded militias that were over inside of Iraq. So I look at things like that and I say, is Iran likely pulling the strings behind some of this? Absolutely. I do believe that to be the case.
I'm not even going to disagree. Is Iran? Hell yeah. I mean, Iran's in a regional conflict with not just Israel, but the United States. I'm not saying I support what Iran's doing, but we're talking factually. And there can be no doubt that the IRGC, the Quds Force, has connectivity with Ansarullah, has connectivity with Hezbollah, and has connectivity with Hamas. They have connectivity with militias in Syria and Iraq as well, because they view Israel and the United States and their European allies to be an existential threat. So yeah, I mean, that's just the way that's the way the cookie crumbles when you are in a conflict. We are in a conflict. We are on the side of Israel in a conflict against Iran and its proxy forces.
Yeah, and Mario, I think you also mentioned Syria as well, like asked me about Syria with Hezbollah. And obviously, they were fighting on the side of the Assad regime. And I look at that and I say, okay, well, how do I feel about this particular situation? Because I also believe that al-Jawlani is a al-Qaeda terrorist that's just slightly deformed and threw on a suit and tie, right? I think that's the general speaking narrative, but I don't think you fight for something for that long and are willing to die for it and commit so many people to die for that reason without holding it deep within your soul. He's also friends with al-Baghdadi, right? And so when I look at these things and I go, okay, Hezbollah may have been fighting on the side of al-Assad. There is going to be some good in there. And I look at that and I say, both of these people, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not okay with. I don't agree with their ideology, reasons they're fighting, so on and so forth. So truthfully, I don't think you have to pick a side when it comes to that matter and say, yes, Hezbollah is doing the right thing inside of Syria, but maybe over inside of Lebanon, maybe not so much. I don't agree with. I just look at that as 2 different parties, like 2 enemies of mine that are fighting that I don't agree with. And it just kind of remains that way.
Yeah, look, I had a whole discussion with Scott Horton a few days ago, understanding the history of Middle Eastern politics since the 1950s. We couldn't finish it in like an hour and a half. We're going to do another 2-hour sit down. It is immensely complex and sad to see the situation in the region. Talking about the region, one country that suffered significantly is Lebanon. And that's a big focus right now. So we have the Israeli prime minister. So what happened recently is the Lebanese government voted for Hezbollah to disarm. So that's a decision by the Lebanese government. Hezbollah said no, but then they seem to show some road towards an agreement. Say, hey, look, if Israel takes some steps in terms of pulling out of the Lebanese territory, then we may disarm, or at least we could discuss disarming. And the Israeli prime minister responded yesterday, said the following: if the Lebanese armed forces take the necessary steps to implement the disarmament of Hezbollah, Israel will engage in reciprocal measures, including a phased reduction of IDF presence in coordination with the US-led security mechanism. Israel stands, so I'll read out the second quote afterwards, but just on that part, is that showing hope for Lebanon? Because I feel like Lebanon's in the middle of it all. He's got Iranian influence through Hezbollah. He's got Israel on the border and just had a few wars in the last 2 decades with Israel. He's got a lot of, Syrians inside of Lebanon, a lot of influence from Syria, at least under the Assad regime. So when I see progress in Lebanon, I see it as hope for the rest of the region. Scott, what do you think of these statements from the Israeli Prime Minister? And do you think there is hope for Hezbollah to disarm? And what does that mean for Lebanon?
Well, we have to parse out what phased withdrawal. What does that mean? Is Israel willing to get out of Lebanon in totality? Is Israel willing to leave the Sheba Valley or Sheba Farms, which has been a point of contention? Israel doesn't believe it to be part of Lebanon. They consider it to be part of Syria. Hezbollah doesn't respect that. It's a sticking point. I don't know if Netanyahu can be trusted at this point in time. What is his ultimate objective, goals and objectives? But I'll put it this way. The fact that people are talking is better than people shooting. They've been talking in Lebanon for a long time. There's been many agreements that have come and gone, and none of them have reached fruition. There's been many conflicts that have come out of failed agreements. But as long as people are talking, we have to, put our weight behind this, because hot air coming out of the mouths of old men is a lot better than hot gas coming out of the rifles held by young men. So,
and do you think Hezbollah should disarm, Scott? Do you think it's in Lebanon's best interest if they do?
I think it's
you got some Lebanese that say if they disarm, if you destroy those weapons, which is what the agreement is, then that weakens Lebanon and allows Israel to take over more territory. That's a concern some Lebanese have. Others believe that Hezbollah disarming allows the country to flourish. You can't have a military within another military other than the official.
Yeah, I don't believe Lebanon can succeed as a nation state with two armed forces. I think there's the Lebanese armed forces, and I think those should be the forces that protect the territory of Lebanon. However, historically, Israel has been disrespectful of the sovereignty of Lebanon, and it was Hezbollah and Hezbollah's resistance that drove Israel out of southern Lebanon. And so until which time Israel can evacuate Lebanon and provide assurances that they're not going to exploit the disarming of Hezbollah by re-engaging, Hezbollah will be a reality. But do I believe Hezbollah should disarm? Yes, absolutely, because I don't believe that you can be a sovereign nation with with a large functioning army. In many ways, Hezbollah is as powerful or more powerful,
stronger and more powerful.
Yeah, so you can't speak of the sovereignty of Lebanon when you have a force like Hezbollah operating, but you can't speak of the sovereignty of Lebanon when Israel is flying aircraft over Lebanese territory without any regard, when Israel occupies significant swaths, when Israel threatens Lebanon repeatedly. It's a two-way street. If you want Hezbollah to disarm, then Israel has to be willing to create conditions conducive to that disarmament.
Matt?
Yeah, I mean, the ceasefire agreement that was kind of struck out last November had to lean heavily on UN Resolution 1701, which included Hezbollah moving north of the Litani River. To this day, they still haven't done that. As far as where Israel's currently at inside southern Lebanon, because Hezbollah did not withdraw and go north of the Litani River like they said they were going to, you have 5 hilltops that are being occupied over on the blue line in southern Lebanon. That's it. You don't have a massive invasion by the Israeli forces or anything like that. And I think it's beyond a fact that Hezbollah, one, had tunnel systems and obviously had plenty of rockets and everything else that were aimed over Israel down inside of that territory. There's also been numerous attempts that are just on video of Hezbollah forces that have attempted to cross the border in the past and done several other things. And Israel does have a right in order to defend its borders from those attacks to keep their civilians from getting killed. And so when they look at that and they look at that area, they're in those little areas. Now, if Hezbollah ended up owning up and coming out and withdrawing that remaining 20%, like I said, they showed some good faith by moving some out. So maybe a good in between, because like you asked, Mario, is this a sign of things moving forward? I think so. I think the U.S. pledged billions of dollars. I forget the actual number, but the U.S. ambassador to Turkey was over inside Lebanon recently. I think it was actually today, if my memory serves me correct, and was talking about things of this nature. So the U.S. has pledged a buttload of money down to southern Lebanon to help them rebuild, and a political situation is definitely there. I think if, we do have, and that is confirmed, that those numbers are 80% Hezbollah withdrawn from those southern regions, and that's confirmed, I don't think it's wrong to have a phased withdrawal of Israel from those 5 different hilltops contingent on where Hezbollah is at, and you just slowly start moving in that direction, because neither of these two sides are going to trust each other. Hezbollah is not going to trust Israel, and Israel is not going to trust Hezbollah. And that's where that international community comes in place. So yeah, Make that happen, have those people on the ground that are verifying that that's happening, and slowly phase that back. Get that money in there to help those civilians that were affected, that were on the ground inside southern Lebanon, to help their lives out. And you're going to see something. And I think Scott and I both agree on this, that you can't have two different armed factions taking place inside of Lebanon. You got to have one or the other. And Lebanese armed forces are the ones that are over there doing it. And the government of Lebanon has, vowed to do these things. So I think that there is hope for the future there.
Scott, but doesn't that show Iran weakening? Just factually speaking, you got Hezbollah disarming, and it severely weakened after the war. And I'm not sure if you agree or not. I think you would agree with that. You've got the Assad regime being overthrown. Yemen, the Houthis don't have much military capacities. The country is just destroyed after years and years of war. And Iran just went out of this 12-day war. We could talk about the significance of the damage there, but we know a lot of their commanders were killed, a lot of their facilities were struck, with Israel having complete air superiority. Without discussing whether it was the right decision or not, and what caused all this over the last few years, and whether it could have been avoided, would you say Iran is severely weakened today, or that's a wrong assessment?
I think Iran is weakened. Whether or not we're going to use the severely is a different question. Iran continues to be a economically powerful country, produces energy. It's linked to the BRICS. It's linked to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It has diplomatic and economic resilience. So sanctions aren't going to, starve them. In terms of Iran's, strategy with the axis of resistance taken a bloody nose. There's how else do you say? What happened to Syria? Syria was an important conduit between Iran and Hezbollah, and Syria's gone. Iran claims that they maintain certain connectivity with local, whatever. There's a difference between flying aircraft into Damascus and running convoys into Lebanon and, running donkeys over smuggler lines. Can Iran continue to provide some sort of connectivity with Hezbollah? Undoubtedly, but it's not on the scope and scale that they were. And Hezbollah is weakened. You take a man, Nasrallah, that had been ruling Hezbollah for decades, and now he's replaced with people, not just the second tier, we're talking third and fourth tier, because Israel took out the second and third tier. These people aren't as confident as Nasrallah is, especially in terms of the domestic politics in Lebanon. Hezbollah is a political party of some note. They play a role in the government of Lebanon. And, Nasrallah was able to navigate the difficult waters between being the leader of a resistance movement, an army, an independent army, and a member of the Lebanese government. These leaders aren't able to do that. I don't think they have the confidence. And so we're seeing that they are being compelled to make compromises that Nasrallah wouldn't have made. This weakens the axis of resistance. So I think we're looking at a situation where, Iran has been compelled to regroup. Iran has other issues now. We have the Zangezur corridor being developed between Armenia and Azerbaijan. That's attracted Iranian attention. Ansarallah and the Houthi, they continue to do their thing. I believe that they largely operate independent of Iran. Iran does provide support, but we see, for instance, the Houthi expanding into Somalia, working with al-Shabaab to develop alternative supply lines and support networks independent of Iran. You speak of religious ideology. There's no connectivity between the Sunni-based al-Shabaab in Somalia and the Shia derivative that Nasrallah has. So, I think we have to take a look at Iran regrouping. They're not defeated, but they aren't what they used to be. There can be no doubt that.
What does that mean for Gaza? What does that mean for Gaza with Iran, Syria, Hezbollah, the Houthis, all that supported Gaza militarily, all weakened?
Look, Hamas is not defeated. Gaza's been eradicated, destroyed. What's happening there is horrific. Whether you put labels on it or not, we have to acknowledge that the price paid by the civilians in Gaza by this conflict is mind-boggling, horrible. But it hasn't resulted in the defeat of Hamas. Hamas continues to resist. Israeli forces continue to be attrited. And so at the end of the day, it's irrelevant where Iran is on this map. What's relevant is that Hamas continues to survive and resist, and Israel has to date been unable to come up with the solution to the Hamas problem.
Matt, we're moving to Gaza. Obviously, I'd like you to comment on the first point and any points that Scott has made. But also, what do you think is the future for Gaza? Israel has just announced not long ago that they plan to enter Gaza City by mid-September. Their claim is to dismantle Hamas's remaining brigades. There's 2 of them apparently, and 1 is in Gaza City. Correct me if I'm wrong. And they want to secure the release of the 50 remaining hostages. Your stance on this, Matt?
Yeah, of course. Just real quick correction in my eyes anyways on something that Scott had said about how the Houthis are establishing new connections with al-Shabaab down over inside of Somalia. I believe it was January of 24 when the 2 U.S. Navy SEALs had fallen overboard on the weapons interdiction that were being smuggled up over into Yemen. That boat was actually on its way from northern Somalia to go into Yemen, and it was carrying Iranian weapons. So it would seem as if the IRGC had already established those connections, and Nasser Allah is just keeping up with those connections. I don't really think they're expanding or creating anything new. As far as what Israel needs to do, is that correct, Mario? The question about Gaza?
So what is the future of Gaza now with first all of the allies, the military allies being weakened, and number 2 with Israel's announcement that they will be entering Gaza City?
Yeah, so I look at this almost like they're taking plays out of the U.S. counterterrorism handbooks, right? When we look at what's taking place. Do you remember months ago, and people said that they were all fake when we had the uprisings and whatnot that were taking place over inside Gaza, where people were standing up and people were, even Israelis, and I argue with Israelis all the time on this, where they're going, no, that was staged. I don't believe they were staged. I actually think that was a decent amount of people who, just like maybe over inside of Ukraine, are sick of the war and sick of the conflict and just kind of want to see an end to this. What ends up happening is you end up going and finding particular clan leaders, and I've talked to, we're going to call them members of the Israeli government about this. And the way they view it is almost like eating a poop sandwich, that nobody inside of Gaza, in their opinion, is going to be 100% on the side of Israel or side with Israeli policies. But the truth is that those people need to govern themselves in a certain capacity, right? So the Palestinians inside Gaza need to be able to govern themselves. They're not going to fall underneath Israeli rule, just like, Ukraine's not going to fall underneath, Russian rule. It's delusional, anybody that actually thinks that. And so we also see Abu Shubab down in the south, right? Doesn't have a very large force. I think it's estimated right around like 300 members. And they were actually actively going out and hunting Hamas not that long ago, and they still continue to do so. They continue to clear and secure some aid routes from point to point, as best as I understand. And so what Israel is doing, I guess, in the future when you look forward to this is going to almost, I don't want to call it nation building, but almost find those clan leaders that they can, get along with, and then allow them to kind of start building up. And just like how you have Abu Shubab down in the south, guys like that are in control of that, you're likely to see them start getting some militarized training and police-like training to start going over their people, because nobody inside of Gaza wants to have the Israelis telling them what to do. It's much better to have the Palestinians do that. And from there, then you kind of start developing that state and that nation in order to get it in to a prospective 2-state solution, if you will.
Another question for you, Matt, before I go to Scott. Trump also said that Gaza will have a, quote, pretty good conclusive ending in 2 to 3 weeks. What do you think he means by that? Because you've got the Israelis saying they're going to enter Gaza City. That will take probably a while. And then Trump saying this will end in 2 to 3 weeks. Is that just Trump?
Mario, you're asking me to get into Trump's head? That's just never going to happen, right? I already explained to you that the man didn't understand what the heck was going on between Ukraine and Russia. I also think he's a little bit delusional if this is going to reach a conclusional end in 2 to 3 weeks. Not to speak bad of, the president of the United States of America, but let's be realistic here. Even Netanyahu said back in, I believe it was like December of 2023, that this is expected to be like 10 years in the making, right? That's half the problem with Americans, and that's half the problem with the West, is we expect things to happen overnight. And the truth is, in order to actually make this work, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be undone, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And you're going to continue to have pockets of, I'll use the opposition's term. You're going to continue to have pockets of resistance throughout this entire time. And so the war is not going to come to a conclusive end. You're just never going to get rid of the ideas that these people have been raised with since their birth. So I think Trump's a little delusional if he thinks it's going to end in 2 to 3 weeks, completely and totally.
Scott? Do you think that could last 10 years, a 10-year operation? And then cut out on Scott's side. While we'll figure out Scott's technical issue, how is that a 10-year operation? How would that look like, Matt?
Well, it's a slow transition, right, Mario? We're not talking about, constant combat operations where you're constantly dropping bombs and bringing the hammer down, but it's literally building it up. If you were to go over to Gaza and try to pull laws out of Gaza, have you done this yet? It's really interesting. If you go and say, okay, what laws are people being tried underneath Gaza? Right there. Have you done this? It's really intriguing if you haven't. No. Good luck finding them. right? A lot of it's going to go back towards the Quran, and a lot of it's going to go back to what the particular elders in that region say. And it's almost like a Islamic tribunal, if you will. Like they'll hold them up and they'll say this event occurred, how did it go, and then depending on what the crime is what punishment you're going to get dealt out, right, according to the Quran. And so not a lot of that stuff is actually like really even written down when it goes to that. And so that's what I'm talking about when it goes down to running a functional government, right? You can't have a functioning government without things like that on the books if you want it to be, recognized by the international community. And so a lot of it's going to go into the training of that nature. A lot of it's going to, and I know this is going to piss a lot of people off when I say it, but arming and equipping, right? Everything that's taking place. You can't expect them to stand up against those pockets of Hamas and to fight back against them like Abu Shabaab's doing without actual weapons and training and equipment, right? And so you're going to actually see a transition process going through here in the near future, mark my words, maybe in the next year. You might see IDF soldiers fighting along some local militia members inside of Gaza. And then you're going to slowly see that transition to the local militia members taking place, and Israel just kind of doing their checks and balances over the years. All the while you have this government that's being built up, and you have like money that's being pumped in there in order to rebuild the economy and several other things. United States government over inside of Afghanistan had, actually it was like the U.S. Special Operations Community had this thing called Village Stability Operations. And it had three main pillars. It had governance, which was basically, connecting the local population to there. And then you also had to worry about the local economy and how people were going to eat. If people aren't being fed, then you've got issues, right? People are going to do whatever they can to feed their family. And you can't hold that against them. A man's going to feed his family the best that he can. He's going to make money however he can to feed that family. And so you need to make sure that all of those things are there. But the first very thing that needs to actually happen is security. Security needs to be paramount so that those people, and this is why I don't think Israel is going to agree to a ceasefire on any sort, because Hamas wants Israel to withdraw from the Gaza Strip in order for that ceasefire to take place. If Israel was to do that, Hamas is undoubtedly going to go back after every single person that's been on camera that took part in a protest that was seen at a aid distribution site, or maybe not every person seen at an aid distribution site, right? Like that's a bit excessive. But they're going to be going after a lot of different people that they deem as a threat. We already saw clan infighting and things of that nature. We see Hamas that was going after clan last year. And so if Israel was to withdraw, those people aren't going to have security. And that's going to cause those people to lose faith within the Israeli government that they're actually going to carry through and actually going to be able to transfer authority over in that manner.
Let me ask you a couple of questions. While we're figuring out Scott's technical issue, I want to ask you a couple of things. When you see those videos, because you seem like a very articulate person, pretty nice guy. I think the war in Lebanon is very nuanced. I can't take a position on it. What's happening in Iran, very nuanced. Syria, everything's very complicated. And I think both arguments make sense. In terms of what I'm seeing in Gaza, it just, the destruction is so massive. The famine that exactly. It's just when you see those videos, when you see those numbers, 70% of buildings destroyed, famine, the risk of famine, different percentages being thrown around, aid trucks struggling. I think you were playing a video on one of your latest, a clip on one of your latest videos. You showed aid trucks coming in, and then a lot of Palestinians just running towards it,
hoarding over them. Yeah, it was that Ocha video.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And you said something after. You said there's a lot of that aid is being seized and stolen by Palestinians and Hamas. But it's hard to know, I look at it, I'm like, these people are just people that are starving, desperate to survive, trying to get that food. I want to get your thoughts on two things. First, genuinely, as Matt Tardio, when you see that destruction, what goes through your mind? Is it like, it's horrible, it's all of Hamas's fault, or no, Hamas fucked up, Israel's going too far? Where do you stand on this? And then I want to ask you about that aid truck as well.
Yeah, so I take that and I try to put things in context first, right? Like proper framework, because it's very easy to look at things like through a computer screen or here in a conversation, and for me to say that Israel had gone too far, right? Like that's a very easy assumption, a very easy statement to take when you look at the destruction that's taking place across Gaza. When I take it and I put it into something relatable for, let's say, like U.S. viewers that are over here watching this, or even a place that a lot of people know, most people know, like the city of Las Vegas. It's got roughly the same square kilometers as Gaza does. Intelligence assessments, whether you like them or not, numerous international intelligence assessments upon Israel entering into Gaza, Hamas had an estimated enemy force of like actual trigger pullers of right around 35 to 40,000 enemy fighters. So you have 35 to 40,000 enemy fighters inside a city the size of Las Vegas. To put that into context, right? In Israel, I think their current assessment on enemy killed in action is somewhere around like 23,000. To put that into like context for people, if we were to take that, whether you agree with the war or not, I'm using this for context. I don't feel like getting a debate on Iraq right now, but we can if we need to, right? when the U.S. went in Iraq between 2003 and 2013, U.S. had killed an estimated 39,000 and some change enemy combatants. And that's across the entire country of Iraq. Across the entire country of Iraq over a 10-year time span, almost 40,000, not even 40,000. And that's what you have inside Gaza, an area the size of the city of Las Vegas. I also take it and I look at things and I go, okay, I mean, the water, for example, that's taking place over inside Gaza. It's undoubtable. I think it's undeniable at this point that Hamas has hundreds of miles worth of tunnel systems. West Point ended up doing a study. I'm trying to remember the year off the top of my head. I don't remember. They estimated those tunnels to be cost right around $1 billion to build all of those tunnel systems. I've had independent engineers take a look at it and they go, yeah, about $1 million per mile worth of tunnel. All right, so you have 1.62 kilometers per mile, and for whoever's listening, right? So we look at that and we say, could that have gone to somewhere else? Yeah, absolutely. I also look at studies because, again, it's so, like you said, it's so nuanced and the devil's always in the details. You know, I also look at things and I go, okay, well, we can look at the study that was done in March of 2024 from the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research Development, where they went into Gaza and they went into the West Bank and they surveyed Palestinians on whether or not they thought 87% of the people that had saw the videos from October 7th that were surveyed, and I think it was 1,570 if my memory is correct, 87% of the people that saw those videos didn't think that atrocities had been committed. But I also know, looking at it from a reasonable standpoint, as somebody that's actually lived with people, right, liberated ISIS-controlled territory, lived with those people and understood the things that they would go through in order to make that happen. And I'm not saying that Hamas is ISIS. I'm not trying to make that comparison. I'm just giving you an idea of my experience on this matter for living with people, right, living by their side, eating their food, like sleeping like under roofs, their roofs, right, under invite. I can tell you, right, that if I was born in Gaza, as an honest man, I could sit here and I can tell you that if I was born in Gaza and I received the type of education that I believe they receive, and I was raised by the type of father that most of these kids likely had, there's no doubt in my mind that I would be a jihadist, right? That I would be fighting for Hamas because that's the type of spirit that I have. But I can also look at that from an honest assessment with all of the information and knowledge that I have right now and say, I pray to God somebody would kill me before I did something like they did on October 7th, because nobody deserves that. I don't care what side you're on. Nobody deserves that. And then I also look a little bit, I mean, Mario, I can keep going, man. I mean, it's so nuanced, you know?
It is, and I think it'll make for a whole other discussion. Scott, I know we've just reached time, but I want to get your thoughts on, I didn't know whether you're going to come back or not when it glitched out for you. And I asked a question for Matt, because what I said to him is when I look at what's happening in Iran, what's happening in Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, it's very nuanced. Ukraine, Russia, it's very nuanced for me. It's like, you know, both sides make good arguments. I'm trying to find the middle ground. A lot of it depends on the numbers, and there's all these different sources that mention different numbers. But when it comes to Gaza, it's difficult for me to really condone what's happening there. I think it's gone too far. In the early days, I understand October 7th, horrific event. Israel had the right to defend itself, but then for how long and how far can they go? So that's the stance that I've taken. It's a bit harder for me to be nuanced on that position. And I wanted to get Matt's thoughts on it. So I want to get your final thoughts on Gaza. And I know we will not get into that debate. We don't have the time for that. And one argument that Matt made is that when you look at the ratio, and let me know if I say it correctly, Matt, the ratio of combatants killed in the war by Israel versus the civilians is a 1-to-1 ratio. I think Israel said that based on their numbers. But if you look at other sources, the SCNR said it's 13-to-1. There's an independent analysis done by the armed AOAV. No idea who they are. Their number is about 4 or 5-to-1. They've got a leaked Israeli intelligence document that put it at closer to, I think it was 5-to-1 in that document. In Iraq, I think it was, in Vietnam, it was 2-to-1. In Iraq, it was about 2 or 3-to-1. So again, it was almost like
3.5 or 4-to-1 in Iraq.
Yeah, so it just depends on which number to trust. Like based on the Israeli numbers, Israel has just taken great precautions and they've tried to prevent civilian deaths, and they've done a great job at it. If you look at the leaked intelligence report or these other organizations, they've done a bad job at it. So that's why it's just very difficult for me to have an opinion on it. But Scott, Matt has, did a great job of articulating his position. I'd love to get your position on this as well.
Well, I don't think we can I don't think we can discredit this leaked intelligence report. It appears to be valid. It lists 8,900 dead combatants, but that doesn't, because of 1,600 of them are probable, meaning the Israelis don't know. And then we get down to what classified as a combatant. The Israelis classify a postman working for Hamas as a combatant. somebody, people who would normally call non-combatants, because they have a political affiliation with Hamas, become combatants. So the actual number of trigger pullers killed by Israel is significantly lower than the number that's cited by Matt. 63,000 is the number of civilian dead that this leaked intelligence report speaks of. Other agencies speak of more, but the bottom line is the kill ratio is skewed. The Israelis aren't the precision strike organization they claim to be. We agreed not to talk about certain terminology and things of that nature, but I would just say that the civilians have paid an exorbitantly high price, and Hamas is nowhere near defeated. 35,000, I think, is the number of Hamas fighters. There's another 13,000 Islamic Jihad fighters. This was before the conflict started. This is according to that leaked report, and only 8,900 are confirmed dead. So that's a hell of a lot of trigger pullers left there right now. And Israel hasn't won this fight. This fight has a long way to go. And I will also say this about October 7th. Talk to the Israelis that were on the front line, the Golani Brigade, the 51st Battalion that took the brunt. Talk to the Israeli defenders. This was a military assault. Civilians got caught up in it. But when we start, we want to talk about civilian to military casualties. It's a hell of a lot better ratio than what currently exists in Gaza today. And also remember that the vast majority of the civilian casualties were brought on by Israeli actions through their, Hannibal doctrine, the slaughter of Israelis at this outdoor festival by Israeli helicopters, the way Israeli tanks fired haphazardly into Israeli buildings, killing Hamas fighters and Israeli civilians at all. So I think we need to be careful about how we characterize October 7th. It was a military assault by Hamas against Israel to achieve specific military and political objectives, one of which, of course, was to lure Israel into Gaza so that what is occurring would occur, because Hamas made a calculated decision that this would destroy Israel in terms of their reputation abroad, because Hamas knew that Israel at the end of the day would behave as Israel always does, with no regard, absolutely, for the civilians.
So on that point,
go
ahead, Matt. I'll let you respond.
Thanks,
Final
Mario.
quick comments.
Yeah, number one, as far as the numbers go, let's look at the Gaza Ministry of Health, right? They've actually been plus or minus a couple percentage points in previous conflicts when it comes down to the reporting, and all of that ends up getting verified after the fact, right? So right now they're sitting somewhere between 62 and 63,000, I believe, killed, right? That number doesn't include the Hamas fighters. It doesn't include the number of PIJ that ended up getting killed. And whether Scott probably wants to admit it or not, enemy combatants is a very broad term that goes into it. Over 5,000 rockets ended up getting set up and fired, estimated, into Israel on October 7th. Those rockets weren't moved just by trigger pullers. Those are moved by underground and auxiliary elements within that terror network that Hamas operates. All of those people that are moving those weapons in and about the battlefield in order to set them up, store them, etc., those are valid military targets. Now, a lot of people don't like to admit that, but it's true. Just like a fuel truck driver in the Israeli Defense Force driving a fuel truck to go and supply a tank on the battlefield is a valid military target, whether or not they're taking active part, in the shooting. Characterizing October 7th in that way, I think, is very critical to make sure that we do that. And when we start talking about it, and we start talking about, let's say, helicopters shooting over at the Nova Music Festival or a tank shooting inside of a house, intelligence does drive operations. And you also have to understand the term fog of war, right? And so those Apache pilots coming on station, when they see armed insurgents jumping into a vehicle and going to drive away, and they shoot that vehicle in order to prevent further loss of life down the road, those helicopter pilots don't know who else is inside of that vehicle. But what they do know is that there's armed insurgents inside of it. Same thing if a tank is receiving fire from a particular building. To use that and point and say that that's the Israeli military using indiscriminate use of fire is honestly, it's extremely intellectually dishonest in my opinion. And I think it needs called out.
Yeah. So Scott, final quick comments on that point, and then I'll thank you both.
There's no comment on that point. I'll let the Israeli, rather than Matt describing what was going through the Israeli helicopter pilots' minds, I'll let the Israeli helicopter. They had no freaking clue what was going on. They went in, it was absolute chaos. It was the fog of war. But the idea that these men were making a deliberate decision to strike a vehicle because there was an insurgent in there, or a militant, or a terrorist, and they struck it not knowing. No, they fired haphazardly. They fired erratically. They had no idea what was going on. They were told to respond to an area, and they began firing. I'm not saying this because of anything else, just to point out that the casualty levels that are mentioned often on October 7th are driven in a large part because of the chaos that was engendered by the Hamas actions and the lack of discipline on the part of the Israelis in their response. It's just important that we point this out. People died. There's no doubt about that. Hamas killed people. There's no doubt about that too. But a lot of the people that died were because of Israel's irresponsible actions. And there will be an investigation in Israel. There already is inquiries going on about the chaos, about the lack of preparation, about the poor.
There is a big investigation going on in that. And I've talked to some of those soldiers and I've interviewed a couple of them. I mean, there's lots of instances that we could go over in like a future, conversation about
I'd love
and
to.
why it took that way, right?
I'd love